Good evening. My name is Cleve Gilmore. I have the honor of being the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Dean in Applied Social Sciences, and it's my honor to welcome you to the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve University for a wonderful celebration. And we're going to move more into this special occasion in describing it, but there are very few signature events in the life of an academic. Of course, when you get your first academic job, that's an important one, right? And then being tenured on the faculty, that's a pretty big one. That's when the twitches start going away and you can start relaxing a little bit. But then there are some individuals you have a conversation with, and I remember having this conversation with Dr. Mark Joseph after he was tenured. He says, well, what now, Cleve? And I said, well, now's the time you can relax and do what you really want to do. And he said, oh, I have some ideas of what I want to do. And you're going to learn more about what that has been in his time here at the school. But he has achieved so much in a short period of time in a young career that we decided to recognize his achievement by giving him the distinction of a named professorship. And that is the Leona Bevis and Marguerite Haynam Chair in Community Development. So I want to thank you for coming here today to share with us this celebration, to have a nice conversation with Mark, and I also want to welcome his family. So I know there are a number of family members here. I see Melania here, and the boys are here. Say wave to everybody. You know, they all recognize you. That's great. A proud moment for Dad, and you'll be there to catch the buttons if they pop off his shirt as he's so expansive in his joy. But I also want to recognize the two women who made this possible. And that is Leona Bevis and Marguerite Haynam. These are two women, alumna of this school, who actually met at SAS, the School of Applied Social Sciences, and they devoted their lives to helping people in this community and in building a stronger Cleveland community. We'll learn more about explicitly what they did. And I was just mentioning to another person before I came up here, these are two social workers. They saved their money so that they could make a legacy gift, a gift that could carry on their mission of helping people in the community. And they wanted to make sure that there would always be community development, community practice at the Mandel School. And when you endow a chair, gee, that ensures it's going to happen, because we're going to continue having a Bevis Haynam Professor in Community Development as long as there is a Mandel School and a Case Western Reserve University. So you know that's forever, right? Two social workers saved their money and they made this commitment. They made it happen. I remember reading earlier in my lives about the school teacher, who everyone was surprised when the school teacher passed away because they found $1 million and was given for a special thing. Well, we have this story here today. I'm very fortunate that I had an opportunity to meet Leona Bevis. Unfortunately, it was after Marguerite had passed, so I didn't meet Marguerite, but I certainly learned about her from Leona. And Marguerite, even when I met her, and I met her a number of times, was still a very strong person. And we talked about what she had done in Cleveland and also what her wishes were for this school and the continued work. And when we came to an agreement that indeed we would establish a chair here, I made the commitment to her that we would fill this chair with a person who could carry out this strong vision that she had had when she was working in Cleveland for building a stronger community. And we certainly have that person today in Professor Mark Joseph. I also want to acknowledge the person who brought Leona to us, quite literally, and that's Bill Ginn, who's sitting here in the front. Wait, Bill, wave your hand. Okay. Bill came to Cleveland from a little school on the East Coast to practice law. It was around 1950, 52? 50. 1950. And when did you meet Leona? It was
by the end of the year in 1950.
By the end of the year in 1950. Everything Bill knows about community development he learned at the foot of Leona Bevis. Frankly, they worked together throughout their careers together, and they did great things. And I remember Bill coming to me and saying, I have a client / friend who has an idea of what she would like to do with a legacy gift. And we had a great conversation. And Bill literally introduced me to Leona, and we were able to continue. So Bill, I appreciated that introduction, the friendship that you had with Leona, and I also want to acknowledge the tremendous work that you've done throughout your life to make Cleveland a better place. Well, I've already acknowledged that my knowledge of Marguerite and Leona is only very small. But we're very fortunate to have two individuals who worked closely with them in their careers, and we'll say early in their careers, and they are going to come forward and participate in a panel that's going to be moderated by Professor Joseph. So I'd like to ask them to come forward first. Myrtle Muntz and Rosalind Busey Khalil. Myrtle, they're both alumna of the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences, or probably SAS. Yes, SAS. And Myrtle is a member of our visiting committee and a member of our Hall of Achievement. She worked closely with Leona at the Center for Community Solutions, formerly known as the Federation for Community Planning. And Rosalind Busey Khalil was the Director of Administration and Special Projects at the Center for Community Solutions and worked with Leona prior to Leona's retirement in 1979. So Mark, I'm going to turn the panel over to you.
All right, good evening. Oh, stop that. Stop it. Very, very silly people. Stop that. No, thank you. Welcome. It's great to see you all. And we're going to jump right in because these two ladies have so much to tell you about the wonderful Leona Bevis and Marguerite Haynam. It has been a thrill over the past few months after I learned that I was going to be appointed this chair, looking into who these women were. And the more I looked, the more amazed and stunned I was that there were these two pioneers so long ago, but so far ahead of their time. The best part of it has been some of the conversations that I had. Bill Ginn was actually my first conversation. We sat by your wonderful fireplace for 3 hours talking about the ladies. And then along the way, talked with both Roz and Myrtle. So thank you both very, very much. And let's jump in. So they're going to help you learn a little bit about these social work pioneers. So Myrtle, if I can start with you. One of the other people I talked to was Steve Minter, who many people would know, another Cleveland legacy in his own right. And Steve said to me that meeting Leona, now this is back, must have been early 60s, and he was just coming out of graduate school. And if you think about where Steve Minter ended up, president of the Cleveland Foundation, Cleveland State University, a legacy in our community, he said, meeting Leona had major career consequences. And if you think about that for a Steve Minter and the trajectory, and so that's kind of where I want to start, is meeting Leona for both of you. Could you tell us a little bit about how you met her, and set up her times a little bit, particularly for the students among us here. Remind us of what those times were like. Myrtle, maybe we can start with you.
Okay. Steve was president of my class here at SAS. So we go back then. But when I was asked to do this, I started to look back at some materials and things that I had saved. Leona was just a wonderful woman. I mean, I met her, I worked at the Federation from 69 to 72. And it was during the transition time from the Welfare Federation and the United Fund, some of the transfer of dollars. It was the time when Bill McCullough retired from the Federation, and the year before he retired, Leona went over to work at the United Fund. She worked there for about 9 months, and when Bill retired, she came back to the Federation as the executive director. I was a planning associate at the Federation, and the thing about Leona was she was so concerned about the community and the community development. And, you know, she couldn't have found a better person, Mark, than you to pick up and carry forth.
Thank you. But we're talking about Leona.
The things she really cared about. No,
Thank you.
We're talking about you being an instrument of Leona just to carry forth and, you know, make all the changes in the community that she talked about. I remember there was one time when she talked about, you know, people living in the neighborhoods. There was no drugstore. There was no grocery store for them to go to. They had no transportation to get to the markets and things like that, and that we needed to do some things for the community. But then I found some articles that had that were in the newspaper and stuff when Leona was appointed as the first woman executive for the Federation, and that was you know, quite an accomplishment at that period in time. And there was one little article in there that talked about she didn't think it would be a problem working with some of the businessmen who were on the committees and things. So it was still, at that time, we were having some of these role model issues, but she was an absolute wonderful woman, and she was a model for me.
Roz, how about you? And so now I'm going to have to let out a little bit of your secret, because Roz and I were having a wonderful conversation about Leona, and I think Roz has a bit of an image that she can be a tough cookie, but I got to see a softer side of Roz where we're reflecting back, so I appreciated that. So tell us about meeting Leona.
Well, my first encounter with Leona was in August of 1978, and it's generally accepted that I started at Community Solutions, then the Federation, when I was 3 years old. And that's the most important thing you'll learn. That's my part of this presentation. But I must admit, I was a little older than that, and I was very intimidatable. And I answered the telephone, and this person asked for Ralph Brody. Well, Ralph Brody wasn't available, and I said, "I'm sorry, sir, Ralph Brody's not here. Can I take a message?" And there was this pause. And the voice said, "Well, would you please tell him that Leona Bevis called?" And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the shortest job ever in history. I just called Leona Bevis a man. It didn't turn out that way, fortunately for me. And I learned that I really did not have to be intimidated by her, but in fact, I grew to admire her, both as a person and as a professional, and as a mentor.
And say a little bit more, what set her apart? What made her different?
Well, I was a very, very junior staff member during her last year before retirement, so I didn't have a lot of personal interaction with her at that time, but I could observe the way she treated people and the way other people considered her. She was respected and admired by everybody, both on the staff and in the community. And when Leona said something, people listened. They just stopped and listened. She was very thoughtful about what she said. She didn't speak in a knee-jerk kind of reaction. She was fully informed on the topic of the conversation. And she could be very firm because she knew she was right, which is a nice place to speak from. Nobody discounted Leona Bevis as the first female executive, as Myrtle mentioned. If there was a glass ceiling, she didn't break through it. She smashed it into smithereens. She sat at tables that traditionally only welcomed middle-aged white men. She was appropriately assertive but not aggressive. And yet with all that, she was easy to approach, and she didn't talk down to anybody. She treated everyone with the utmost of respect, even the most junior of staff members who probably insulted her. And she gave people dignity and appreciated that whatever they did, as long as they did their best.
Myrtle, you talked about her as a role model. What about her made her a role model for you?
Well, she didn't back off things. You know, when she had something that she felt strongly about that needed to be done, you know, she kept working on it. I think her modeling came so much from her commitment and her passion that, you know, she just made it look like, you know, being a social worker was an absolutely wonderful thing to do, and that we should all be giving back to the community. And so I want to be like her.
You've talked about the kind of gender dynamics of the day. What else was going on in Cleveland at that time? Can you give us a sense of what were the kind of things that Leona and Marguerite had to deal with in their careers?
Well, I think that during that time there was the beginning of merging some of the agencies, and that was sort of a new venture. I remember what's now probably the Center for Families and Children. There were like 4 or 5 agencies that were blended to create that, and she was very concerned about families, the welfare of families, the services that would be provided in the community for that. So that was a transition thing. I was kind of laughing that I found some articles that were in the newspaper that I kept all these years. I don't know what I was doing with them, but that there were 300 people that came out to honor Leona when she was appointed as the executive of the Federation. So she had been at the Federation for like 19 years before that, but she already had an impact in the community, and people just poured out to support her in her new role. And of course, that as a role model, you know, was a wonderful footsteps to follow in.
Thank you. So we've talked about Leona. We're going to talk a lot more about Leona, but let's talk about Marguerite. Now, it was pretty easy to find people who could tell me a lot about Leona. Marguerite was tougher.
Yeah.
And my sense is that she was the quieter of the two. Now, these were buddies. These were lifelong friends, roommates, and actually all through life buried together now in Knollwood Cemetery. But it seems like she was the quieter one, where Leona was kind of the force of nature. You know, folks have a little harder time putting a finger exactly on Marguerite. And I know, Myrtle, I don't think you met Marguerite, but...
I met her, but I did not have any interactions with her. I knew she was at, you know, Traveler's Aid.
Right. But Roz, you did meet Marguerite, so tell us a little bit about the more elusive Marguerite Haynam.
I don't know about that. She definitely didn't step into the limelight, as you mentioned. She quietly did her own advocacy for the disadvantaged, and you can see that through her own career. She was at Traveler's Aid. She was on the staff of the Youth Bureau. She was assistant professor of child welfare at SAS, a caseworker at Children's Services, and director of the program at Children's Services, which worked with unmarried mothers. I got to know her a little bit long after Leona retired, because she continued to work as a volunteer with us. And so I had the opportunity to engage with Marguerite a little bit. She was always very supportive of the Federation, of Leona's work and the issues that were important to her. And she, in fact, herself served on one of the Federation's committees at one point.
And if you had to describe her, how would you describe her for us?
Very gracious. I don't know.
So we actually, and I learned this from Bill, have Marguerite to thank for having this endowment at the school. Because Marguerite actually had 3 degrees from Case Western and taught here at the school for a little while. And it was initially she who wanted to give some of her estate as an endowment for the school. And then she and Leona, being such close friends, Leona decided she would follow, also having the relationship with SAS. So she might not have had the limelight, but she played a major role in the fact that I get to be standing here before you today. So thank you, Marguerite, wherever she went. Why am I back? Why do we need 2 of me? All right. So Roz, you then made this cool trip. So Roz had an assignment to write a paper on like a woman role model or someone who you admired.
Yeah.
And so I think you just wanted to go hang out in Connecticut. But
Sure, why not?
At this point,
it was a lovely drive.
The 2 women were living in Connecticut, and so Roz made a drive out. This was late in their life, and spent
Their life, not my life.
right late in their life. That's right.
Just want to be clear on that.
Spent a couple days with them.
Yeah, we.
Tell us about the trip.
Yeah, I had to do this class, this paper, and I needed to pick somebody who I admired. And from both a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint, I admired Leona because after she retired, I worked closely with her she did some volunteer work for us in regard to our 75th anniversary campaign, which Bill was also very involved in. And so a friend and I drove out there for a long weekend, and Leona and Marguerite graciously invited us to stay at their house, which was totally unexpected. Took us to this nice little restaurant. And they took us to the beach so we could walk on the beach. I'd never been there before. And so I had the opportunity to talk with her in person rather than just do an interview on the phone, because I really didn't want to do that. So she told me a lot about her life, some of the general biographical things that you can find anywhere. But then she told me that when she graduated from college, she went to work in what was a relatively new field, aid to dependent children. Yeah, that's what I said. And she told me that the population had grown tremendously due to the steel mills, and the workers had brought with them family members who were perhaps illiterate and unskilled. And at that time, because ADC was so new, they didn't have a lot of formal policies or procedures yet. So her job was to visit families at their homes and determine if they needed any extra help in order to, or financial aid to maintain a basic standard of living for that time. And she recognized that these people had to learn to read and to develop a basic understanding of math in order to survive, first of all, but also to experience any social, upward social mobility. So she started teaching them, and she was told to stop it because it was considered beyond the role of a social worker. Well, that was very frustrating to her, as you can imagine, and as she told me this story many years later, that frustration still came through. And of that time, but then also the fact that so many people still, and that was 2005, still at that time, people were struggling, many of them, just to have the basic needs for survival. And so she left that job, moved to Cleveland, graduated in '45 from Western Reserve University, and that's when her Cleveland career began.
So if you could just help us imagine sitting there with them at that stage of their lives, they're kind of reflecting back. What was that like? What did you take away from being with them at that time?
I felt like I was in the presence of something very important. Sorry. And I didn't know you were going to ask me that question, because that's a very emotional response. But they were great ladies, and it touched me. And thank you for asking me that question in front of a group of people.
Thank you. You can get me later. So to sum up then, if we think about the legacy of these 2 incredible women for us today, because I think this isn't just about history, and in my remarks in a little bit, we'll bring it right home to today, but for both of you, what would you say the legacy is? What should we be thinking about and carrying forward to honor the path and the journey that these two women walked. Myrtle, what would you say?
Well, I think that we have a lot of work to do in strengthening the services in our communities, in working on behalf of peace with all of the discomfort and disarray and what's going on currently. I think that both Leona, and even though I didn't know Marguerite well, both of them would want to continue in the vein that you are currently working in. And I think that, would sit very well with them.
Thank you.
I think that's where we need to continue. You've started on that track, and they're going to be very happy with you continuing.
Thank you, Myrtle. Roz, how about you? What's the legacy for you?
Well, I had a very different role than Myrtle did with them. So over the past 40 years, I've had the privilege of working with and learning from people like them, Leona, Marguerite, Bill, others, who played critical roles in the development of this community. And they had many things in common. They always ensured they knew what they were talking about before they started talking. They were very passionate about the people they were trying to help, and they always kept in mind the ultimate goal of their work. They weren't afraid to take on controversial issues and stand their ground when needed. They treated others with respect and dignity, and they showed appreciation for those around them. And I think that if we individually do our best to embody those same qualities, that we really can't be, we have to be successful in what we're doing.
Thank you. So Roz is still at the Center for Community Solutions today, and I think there's some other folks from the center here, at least one. Who else is here from the center? Raise your hands high and proud. Great, thank you all for being here. Yes. And would you join me in thanking our two panelists? Thank you both so much.
You weren't supposed to go too far, Mark, so
Okay.
I'm going to have you come on up here.
Okay.
All right. You get to sit in the hot seat for a bit.
Okay.
'Cause I have a few remarks about Professor Mark Joseph. I've already given you some compliments. I've told you, but we're very proud that you're here and the work that you're doing. I want to relate to the audience that Mark came to our attention, I think it was about 14 years ago. We'd actually had a tragedy at the school. Art Naparstak, former dean, professor of community development, had worked with the faculty on developing a strategic plan that included a reinvestment in community development. That was completed, and unfortunately, Art passed away about 5 months after it was completed. And so we were looking for additional leadership. We already had very good people here, particularly Professor Claudia Colton as a member of our faculty. But we needed some additional help. And Claudia had met this really intelligent fellow at Bellagio, not in Las Vegas. I thought it was Las Vegas. I thought, oh yeah, I've heard they have nice fountains there. No. But she was in Bellagio at a special retreat on community development, and I think Mark Joseph was brought in as a facilitator or a speaker. Is that?
I was actually, they had someone who couldn't make the trip, so I happened to be asked at the last minute to go.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I snuck in the back door, and then I took over.
Well, you impressed. You impressed. And so Claudia said, there's this young guy in Chicago who's doing some good things. I think we should have him out to meet with our faculty and to talk about the work that's going on and to help inform what is going to be a big task for us moving forward. So Mark came out. He did that. He did make a great impression. We happened to have a a job opening up the following year. Mark applied. We were happy that he applied. Others applied too. But Mark was obviously the person whom we wanted. But it isn't just a phone call with Mark. I met with Mark in Chicago. I remember we had a nice dinner.
Wacker Drive?
Yeah, pardon?
On Wacker Drive?
On Wacker Drive, yes, and we had a nice dinner. And I told Mark that we'd like to have him in Cleveland. And he said, well, I'm really doing some great work here in Chicago. He wanted me to sell it to him, okay? And so I said, well, I know you're doing great work. That's one reason why we're asking you. But we think you can do even more in Cleveland. And Cleveland needs you. And a person who helped us to sell this was Congressman Louis Stokes, who met with Mark and told him the same story. And I wanted to acknowledge Brett Stokes, who's here, Congressman Stokes' grandson, is here. And Mark very generously says that, was that really that conversation with me that really sold it? But I know it was the conversation with Lou Stokes, right? Because Lou could sell. And Mark did decide to join us. Came here, worked very hard at the school, establishing his scholarship, working with his colleague Mark Chupp in rewriting our curriculum, creating a great curriculum in community development. We call it Community Practice for Social Change now. And it's one that has grown, it's attracted students, and has done very important work in the community. Because part of what they brought here was the vision that when students are being trained here and they're learning theory, they should put that theory to work not just in their field work, but also part of their classes. Some people call it service learning. And because of that vision, we have seen major changes occurring in the city of Cleveland, and particularly in the city of East Cleveland, through the commitment that our students have made in the community to make East Cleveland and also other parts of Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, stronger communities. So as educators, they knew how to harness the talents of their students and put them to work immediately. When I talk with students in the community practice program about what it's like when they go on the job market, they say, oh, it's really easy, because I just talk about what I've actually done. Let me show you the grant application I wrote for an agency that was funded. Oh my God. Yeah, sign up here, come join our agency and do this work. Well, Mark Joseph and Mark Chupp, or as we affectionately talk about, the Marks, they made that happen. Mark then went on after he achieved tenure, and I said, now you can relax and do what you really want to do. And then he established the National Initiative for Mixed
Income Communities.
Mixed income communities. I always have to be helped with that. NIMC, and has built a great team in order to address the challenges, particularly of mixed income developments, and published, in addition to his scholarly works, a very important book that's received multiple awards titled Integrating the Inner City, The Promise and Perils of Mixed Income Public Housing Transformation. And the Institute, the National Initiative on Mixed Income Communities, continues to work on that and work in other ways throughout this nation. As close as the Commodore Apartments, one block from here, but also in other communities in the DC area, in St. Louis, and many others. I'm always happy when Mark is still in town for occasional faculty meetings and meetings with us, because he's so busy moving about. He's been recognized by many organizations. Recently, a scholarly article was published identifying him as one of the top African-American scholars in the nation in social work. And very telling, I just saw a couple of his colleagues turned to each other and say, I didn't know that. Because he doesn't call attention. It was one of his colleagues, David Crampton, who brought it to my attention, not Mark. So I'm glad you did, David. Thank you. Mark has also been recognized in a very significant way that actually made the news today. He has been asked to join the Board of Trustees for the George Gunn Foundation. Very significant appointment.
And David Abbott is here.
And David's here. Mark is also serving on the External Advisory Committee of the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, another major national foundation. So when the position became available for the Leona Bevis and Marguerite Haynam chair, and I needed to keep my commitment to Leona, that we had a national leader who was not only a great scholar, but somebody who actually worked directly in the community to transform people's lives, I didn't have to look far. And I spoke with my colleagues. It's the dean's decision, but I went to my colleagues, the other professors, the other endowed chairs, and I said, what do you think? And their response was, of course. This is a man who's deserving of this distinction. And Mark, we have something to signify your chair. And I have to take the microphone with me. We actually have a chair. With a nice plaque identifying him as the holder of the Leona Bevis and Marguerite Haynam Professor in Community Development Chair. And the chair itself was established in 2010, and you're the proud holder as of 2017. So, Mark. Congratulations. Thank you so much. And now I turn the agenda over to Mark for a few brief remarks.
All right. Wow, wow, wow. What a night. What a night, what a night. So let me start with some thanks. And I got to start with my creator, our creator, for this incredible life journey that I'm on that just gets more and more wondrous. And the chance to give back. I mean, living a life where you feel like you could make a difference for real folks is such a privilege and a blessing. So I'm also thankful for this moment of celebration, to be in a room like this. And folks who know me know this is hard for me because I just want to spend time with each and every one of you alone. So to be with all of you, 100 of you at once, is really tough. It's really, really tough. But it's also powerful. So thank you all for coming, even those over there, I see you. See you all. It's really an incredible array of folks who provided love and support for us in our 11 years in Cleveland. Speaking of our 11 years in Cleveland and my life journey, some of you know I am blessed to be a part of a lifelong love affair with a woman who dresses very stylishly, as you might have noticed. Melanie Patrice Labatt Joseph, my one and only. Would you stand and be recognized, please? Come on, give it up, give it up. Oh, for real though, we could not, you're going to hear a lot about team efforts. This is a team celebration, but this is where the team starts right here. It's been an incredible run. Along the run, there have been these three rascals who have joined us. The eldest rascal is not here. Layla is studying on the West Coast. We talked to her last night. Two of the rascals are here. Malik, our 18-year-old, who will be heading off to college in the fall. Could you stand up, Malik, and be recognized? Malik Sankara. And then Speaking of rascals, Ayande Patrice Joseph. Ayande is our 8th grader, so as Malik heads off, Ayande will be headed to high school, so I get 4 years of him all to myself in high school, one to focus on, and it's going to take that to be able to focus on it. All right, so one thing I've learned about my wife, and I learned it before, but I relearned it over the last 24 hours, is that my wife loves surprises. So 4 years ago, some of you were part of my book event, co-authored with Rob Chaskin, and she pulled off what I thought was the surprise of a lifetime, bringing in friends from out of town who just walked up casually right as the event was about to start. Well, the lady who is my lifelong love affair has done it once again. My mother, Jennifer Joseph, is here. Stand up, stand up. Come give this son a hug. Come down here. I gotta get it all done. I don't even know how long she's gonna be here. I don't know when she got here, but she's here representing herself and my father, Richard. So I appreciate you being here. So that was surprise number 1. I did know that one of my 2 brothers was going to be here, so Anthony Joseph, stand up, be recognized, my friend. My brother Anthony, who moved to the state just a year and a half ago from Georgia, so he's now down in Columbus, and I see you become a sock guy. Oh, all right. All right, that's impressive. And then my brother Robert is on the West Coast as well. I've also been blessed in life with other brothers, and so I've got 2 of them here who also surprised me. One of whom I'm going to be seeing in Boston in 4 days, and yet he flew out here. Andrew Richmond, dear friend since college. So Andrew. And David White, another dear, dear friend since Oxford days. And another surprise, so very, very lucky man. And then, speaking of team effort, our NIMC team, the National Initiative on Mixed Income Communities. So please stand, folks, be recognized. So let me tell you who we have here. We have got Aaron, we've got Kwame, Dawn, Joni, Morgan, Sharice, Taryn, Emily, Amy, Diane, if I missed anyone. And then 2 honorary members today. They're part of our Triple Aim partnership. Bill Traynor, Frankie Blackburn, please stand up. Please stand up, be recognized. So those of you who hear about community network building and all the really cool, effective neighboring work that we do, these are the gurus who invented that stuff and allow us to play with it, and we play together. So another surprise. I had no idea these guys were going to be here. And let's see who else I want to call from our team who is not here. Other members, you should hear their names, Salin and Yeridine and Latoya and Carolina, and I could go on and on and on, but you get a sense of this amazing group of people who do all this work together. I want to thank Dean Gilmore, who came to Chicago and sat me down on Wacker Drive. We had a wonderful meal, and he began to tell me about Cleveland and the Mandel School, and the more that I began to hear about this school where being out in the community was as valued as being in your books, being in the classroom. You literally cannot find a faculty member here who doesn't have some kind of partnership out in the community. And I was at this little, not very well-known school on the south side of Chicago, where you kind of had to explain why you were spending so much time out in the community. And it just really seemed like the right place for me. And we, as you know, we've not looked back from the time we came here. So thank you to you. And you had 2 compatriots who you mentioned. Claudia, I think I saw Claudia. Still here, Claudia? There you are. So Claudia was someone else who also helped recruit me. And then Sharon Milligan. Did I see Sharon? Where are you, Sharon? Sharon was the one who actually made the first call that I picked up the phone, and the first time I heard Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences with Sharon Milligan, around about 2004, saying we'd like you to come take a look at our school. So can we give them a hand for this? Several of my colleagues are here at the Mandel School, and I need to thank them. I'm a different kind of dude, as all of you know, who know me. And so it's taken a little bit of getting used to, but my colleagues have been patient with me, haven't they, Dean? And figured out how to give me some room to do my thing and be myself here, which I deeply, deeply appreciate. I also want to thank one colleague in particular, Aloan. Thank you for being here. I am the second person to have a chairing ceremony this academic year. And so Aloan Townsend, Dr. Aloan Townsend was the first. She received the Ralph S. and Dorothy P. Schmidt Award. So can we give Aloan a hand as well? Thank you for being here. We also have some generous supporters of our work in the House, so I definitely need to thank them. I don't think I saw Sheila Wright. Did Sheila make it? I know she wanted to be here, representing Albert Ratner and the Good Community Foundation, so we're very grateful for their support. Chuck and Shar Fowler also were hoping to be here. I don't think they made it yet. Okay. And Michael Taylor is here. I did see Michael. Where's Michael? From PNC Bank. Thank you, sir, for your support. And also a new friend, David Heller from the NRP group. Thank you also for your support. And Joel Ratner, kind of a partner and a funder, but certainly has funded and supported our work of the Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and some other members of the CNP crew. I see Evelyn and Mordecai and Nina over there. Did Linda make it? Linda, there she is. Linda Warren is there. So thank you, CNP, for all your support and partnership. Very appreciated. And Brett Hammond, here representing the Stokes family. Thank you, sir, for being here. I just so appreciate the partnership with the Stokes family. As some of you in the room know, we are working to endow our center. It will one day be the Louise Cynthia Stokes Center for Equity and Inclusion. And that's something that the Congressman and I talked about and worked on before his death, and now his family has joined in. So Eric Hammond first, and then Brett. I know Cordell wanted to be here, and Chuck Stokes was actually planning to be here, and then got pulled away suddenly, so he sends his regards. So can we give a hand to the Stokes family? And last, but certainly not least, some folks worked very, very hard to make this wonderful event possible. Marianne, where are you? There she is. Marianne Lax, everyone. Director of Advancement here. So she has been my running buddy in putting this evening together, and it's like, I want to find some people who knew Leona and knew Marguerite. How are we going to find them? And we made the trek out and sat with Bill, and you've just been supportive every step of the way. So thank you for that. It's been really fun. And Lauren, I think, is up here also, our Assistant Director of Communications. Let's give her a hand. Thank you. And Tracy Bradnan there, who's our Director of Communications. And then Nada over there, our Director of Alumni Relations, who obviously, this is her thing. You gotta be feeling good right now, Nada, right? Alumni stuff. So thank you very much. She was the one who organized all the invites. And then I know Edna Wade did a lot of work supporting it. And Ina Brand, is Ina? Where is Ina? Is she around somewhere? All right, let's give her a hand as well. Is there anyone else I missed who worked on the event? Who should be thanked? Thanks, Laku. All right, wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so I do get to give some very brief remarks, and let's check again. Oh, okay, we're good, we're good. So this graph shows a really interesting phenomenon about mixed income development. I got you guys. I'm not doing statistics tonight. Gotcha. Come on. So my son Ayande, he saw the graph, he started to take a nap. He's like, okay, graph time. We're not doing that. We're going to talk about the Bevis Haynam Action Agenda. That's what we're talking about tonight, because that's what they will want us to talk about. Woman-head social agency. Oh no, what's going to happen? Love that headline. All right, so let's see what Leona and Marguerite would want us to think about. So there's Marguerite. So what do we know about Marguerite? We knew she was a gracious lady of her time, and you told us again. We knew she liked to be in the background, and she had a quiet strength to her. And then we've heard about Leona. And Leona was a pivotal, bold figure in our city, in our region. She was a bridge builder. Hold on to that one. That's the one that's really sitting with me. She was a bridge builder. She brought these agencies together and created the Federation. She brought people together who weren't working together. Bill Ginn told me that she knew something about everything. She was incredibly knowledgeable. She was a superb listener. Think about that one in the context of our day. How many superb listeners do you know? And she was open-minded. I forget who said it. I think I read it about her in an article that she was willing to change her mind. Willing to change her mind. How many of us are willing to change our minds? And I love this, because this is a woman of my heart. She was methodical, strategic, as my students know. What's my favorite word? Strategic, and tactical. So a few quotes that I found from Leona that I found really inspirational. She said, these are all from 1972, "There is a drastic need for profound and fundamental reform if we are to improve the quality of life." And it's striking to me how these quotes are 40 plus years ago and still could be right today. They're speaking to us today. She said, "I think we have to eliminate every form of discrimination in our society." Every form of discrimination. Tonight I'm going to talk mostly about racial discrimination, but I want to acknowledge we have many, many forms that we need to be working to eliminate. She also said, I love this is a Cleveland lady through and through. She said, "I am never pessimistic about Cleveland. You may wish things could move faster, but you never become discouraged." Love that. So let me give a quick peek, because I know some folks probably said, "Mark, I did like to hear a little bit about what you're working on." So I don't want anyone to leave empty-handed tonight. So a quick peek at our applied research agenda, and Amy and I are going to be giving a talk, as I mentioned, in Boston on Friday. And so we've put together, we want to use this as a chance to pull together some threads of our work. So very, very quickly, 1 minute, Ayande, stay awake. Our North Star, the thing that gets us out of bed in the morning, is urban equity and inclusion. That's the goal. Equity and inclusion in our urban areas. We had a discussion earlier, thank you, Joni, about metro areas and regions. And so this is what we're going for. This is actually, some of you saw from the Progress Institute talk, an actual block in Cleveland, 128th Street, where we're doing our effective neighboring project. Incredibly diverse block. We want to have more and more blocks that have that kind of diversity, but these neighbors are trying to figure out how they work together even more effectively across lines of income and race. Our starting point is this, which we see far too often around our city and around our country. So we want to figure out how to get from here to there. For the past almost 15 years, and Amy Carre, Dr. Amy Carre, has been part of this journey from that length of time, we've been following mixed income development as the strategy. If you intentionally design housing complexes for a mix of people, can that promote urban equity and inclusion? Now, where are we headed, next 5 years, is we're going to extend that work and hopefully get closer to the North Star, but we're going to focus in on 3 specific elements of that work. How do you shift culture within those communities and within the organizations? And these are Bill and Frankie's words, from fear to aspiration. Far too much fear and isolation in those communities. How do we have developers and property managers and service providers who aren't afraid of the people they're around and don't want the people they're around to be afraid of them, but are actually promoting aspiration? Social dynamics remains a focus of ours. How are people knitting themselves together as a cohesive community? And upward mobility. We're not just building housing so that people can stay there and remain poor and low income in very fragile economic circumstances. That should be a platform, but it's not. And so we're going to redouble our efforts on that. But we are adding 2 streams of work, one on what we're going to call inclusionary development. You all may have heard of inclusionary zoning. You may have heard of inclusionary housing. Well, very soon you're going to be reading in a scholarly journal somewhere about inclusionary development, because we're building a framework about a much more comprehensive form of inclusionary housing. And thanks to Dr. Kare, she's going to bring in some of her work on the cost of segregation. Some of you heard us when we were on the local public radio station talking about this work, on how much it costs all of us to be so segregated. Not just those who are isolated away. It costs all of us. That's how we win, when we can make that argument, that we will all benefit from urban equity and inclusion. Concentrated affluence. We talk a lot about concentrated urban poverty, but what about the concentration of affluence, where people can concentrate themselves away? And what are they missing out on? What's the story there? Let's go study some white folks. So Amy's going to do that. She might take me with her. And we are going to wrap all of that in a racial equity and inclusion frame. Throughout all that work, we're going to keep our focus on racial equity and inclusion. And thanks to Joel Ratner and the team, Mordecai and Evelyn and Nina, we kicked off on Friday a racial equity inclusion metrics project where we're going to be measuring the work they're doing here in Cleveland and help them figure out, how do you measure progress when you're working on racial equity and inclusion as an organization? What should happen differently? What should you be doing differently? So folks, this is the game plan for the next little while. Look okay? Gonna work out? Everyone go with that? Okay. All right, back to our main event, the Bevis Haynam Action Agenda. So, what would be in a Bevis Haynam Action Agenda? Well, let's take the lady at her word. She said we should end discrimination. I think we would need to be bold. We would build bridges. We would be methodical. We would be methodical. We would listen superbly. We would open our minds. Stay positive. And I think Marguerite would add, and do it with grace. So here's our action agenda. All right, so to close out, I'm going to apply it to myself and my team, to the Mandel School, and who else? All of you. So you're all going to leave with a charge this evening, so hopefully you're ready. All right, me first. And my team. Sorry, folks, we're in it together. So what I did is I just picked off some of the pieces of the action agenda. So for us, I prioritize listening superbly. You know, we have worked hard. I've worked hard in my career, depending how far back you count, got my PhD in 2002, to find my voice in the academy, in the policy world. We're there, right? We have a voice. I think the key and the next level is, how do we elevate the voices of others? Right? That's the harder work. It's easiest once you're there to be the one talking at the mic. So what's the work we're going to do to elevate the voices of others and to be more skillful at that? Open your mind. I'm getting to be a bit of a crotchety old dude with strong opinions. Is that true? Lifelong love affair? So how do we stay open to new ideas, right? Because I think we've actually figured some stuff out, right? Bill, Frankie, you guys are the gurus. We've figured some stuff out. We're trying to take it to the world, to the country. How do we stay open to new ideas, even as we think we've figured out some secret sauce? And we do. We really think we've got some intriguing ideas, but we need to stay open to new ideas. And finally, stay positive. You would probably not think of this one for me. Usually a pretty positive guy. But it's a hard moment to be positive. I called Melanie last week. I was in St. Louis. Emily and I were there. And boy, St. Louis is a racist city. I know no other way to say it. I mean, they draw school districts to exclude little children from better schools. They change the designation of schools so that kids can't leave them. And you feel it. You walk around, you literally feel like it's just two classes, two cultures, and it just was sitting with me in a really hard way. And trying to figure out, are we really going to get anywhere? We're in so deep. We're in so deep. Hundreds of years in, right? So, but I can't live there, right? Our job in this building is to inspire the next generation. And so we have to get positive, and we have to find a way to stay positive. So thank you, Leona and Marguerite, for reminding me. And stay focused on the possible. All right, that's me and the team. How about the Mandel School? So end discrimination. We do a lot of work outside our walls to do this. Recently, we've been really digging in, and I thank you, Dean Gilmore, for stepping into the charge on this, to say, what about within our own walls? I think Leona would ask us that question. It's harder to control what goes on out there, but in here, we are a bounded community. So why would we as a social work school, and you can read our mission, is our mission still up over there? Maybe not yet, we'll be back up. But we have a mission about doing this work. We should be the first to be able to say, within our walls, we have equity and inclusion. And we cannot say that today. We're working on it, but I think Leona and Marguerite would ask us to redouble our efforts. And feel free to take this back to your own organizations as well. We're not picking on anyone, but this is home base. Build bridges, build bridges. Like anywhere in society, we have silos, we have cliques. Those can be especially fierce in the academy. They're almost part of life, we just accept them. Once again, I think we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard as a social work school, and I think that's what Leona and Marguerite would say to us. That we have to name, where we have silos, we have to name them, and where we have cliques, we have to name them and break that up, and not accept it just because that is the way things tend to be. And finally, be methodical. As the dean reminded us maybe a month ago or two, it's time for another strategic plan. This will be the third that I've been through. No one necessarily gets excited. Wally Gingrich is laughing because he's been through some. We can fall into the trap of checking the boxes to get through it and getting it done and then putting it away. David Miller, at our last faculty meeting, remember what you asked in terms of strategic plan?
No, I don't.
David said, well, hey, if we're about to start a new strategic plan, can we get our old one and see how we did on the old one? And it's like, wow, brilliant idea. So who's looked at it recently, right? Where is it? I don't think Leona would be too pleased with us. And our last strategic plan, all of us know the university had done theirs and basically gave us a template and said, can every school fit their plan within the university's plan? So we were really constrained in our plan. I think Leona and Marguerite would want us to be methodical, strategic, and tactical, and use this opportunity of our strategic plan to do a meaningful strategic plan. All right, I'll take the Mandel School off the hot seat. And each of you. So I know what Melanie is thinking. She's like, I can't believe you used a white hand. So like anyone who's got any emojis for me, when they switched them over and you could do black emojis, it was like the best thing. Of course, it took however many years. So you'll know that I would be the last person to use a white hand. So I started putting a brown hand up there, but it's Leona and Marguerite pointing at you guys. So it's a white, I know it's a man. I couldn't find a woman's hand. Okay, I can't win. I can't win. I can't win. I missed a win. All right, moving on. All of you, end discrimination. And you say, Mark, how do we end discrimination? Are you kidding me? You just told me you're despairing in St. Louis. Here's how you do it. Use a racial equity lens. And those of you who heard me at the Progress Institute won't be surprised by that, but I really think it's a pathway forward. Be bold. So what are Leona and Marguerite asking you to do? Start one new social change activity outside your comfort zone. Okay. We are all spending too much time in our comfort zones. So pick one social change activity. It could be once a year, but pick one activity you're going to do outside your comfort zone. Build bridges. You can probably guess. What am I going to ask you to do here? Get a racial equity buddy. Build a new relationship with someone different from you. Seriously, I'm very serious. And I know everyone who is here. So when I see you, I'm going to be asking you. Pick someone different from yourself and build a new relationship with them. So you may be thinking, well, Mark, how are we going to remember this? This felt good in the moment, but we're going to be home half an hour from now. We're going to forget what you said. It sounded good. And you'll say, I don't even know what a racial equity lens is. Well, what's a party without party favors? So team, now is your moment to hand out the party favors. Dean Gilmore, Anne-Marie. All right, make sure you get your party favors before you leave. And with that, I thank you very, very much. Enjoy your evening. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.